Wednesday. I am excited to be here talking with you about how to add therapy intensives to your practice. So I'm going to go through some information today. I've got some notes over here on my side of the screen. So if you see me looking over there, that's what that's about. If you have any questions throughout this, if you are here live, feel free to put those in the chat and I will get those questions answered here. If you are watching the replay, feel free to comment on the posting, send me a message, let me know what questions you have so I can answer that for you. So if you don't know me already, if you haven't watched any of these videos, if we haven't messaged, my name is Amanda. I am a licensed psychologist in Oregon. I'm in my own private practice doing both kind of routine therapy as well as therapy intensives, as well as I have a coaching business where I support other therapists and especially trauma therapists with adding intensives, getting their fees higher, getting booked, doing better marketing. So if you are of interest, please do reach out to me and we can talk about ways I can support you with those goals. But to dive into the topic for today, when it comes to adding therapy intensives to your practice, there are a few things that you want to consider. So those are the things I'm just going to kind of read off some questions of things that you want to be thinking about if you want to add therapy intensives to your practice. So to start with, do you want to offer adjunct intensive therapy only? So by that, I mean, maybe you're only doing therapy intensive packages. So let's say you specialize in EMDR, brain spotting, IFS, something like that, some kind of somatic form of therapy, or maybe you do a special form of couples therapy like Gottman, emotionally focused therapy, discernment therapy, whatever that might be. So if you only offer adjunctive intensive therapy, then that would be important to know because maybe you're only offering then like intensive packages. So that would be the thing that you're wanting to market and put on your website and things like that. So that's one thing to consider. Or slash and do you want to work intensively with clients, and whether that's current clients you have, new clients you're marketing to and trying to kind of reach and get onto your caseload. And by that, I mean a few different things. Some people working intensively with a client is, okay, so we do 90-minute sessions by default instead of 45, 50, or 60 minutes. For some people, that's we do 2-hour sessions every other week, or we do a 4-hour session once a month. It can be whatever that looks like, but that's important to know of thinking about if that's a way that I might want to work with clients. Again, how do I market that? How do I make sure I have space in my calendar for that? Because it's going to be hard to offer someone consistent 90-minute appointments if you schedule everything in like hour increments, because it's going to throw everything off. You're going to have less of a lunch break, or you're going to start or end earlier than you like to. So just make sure that you're planning for that in your schedule if working intensively is something that you want to explore. Or do you want a mixture between kind of weekly sessions and intensive clients? So the mixture is currently what I have. I see between 10, 12, maybe 15 for some monthly maintenance sessions. Routine people who are coming weekly, every other week. And then I do intensive packages, as well as some of my clients work intensively. So I do a mix of a few, and I do that because that's what I like to do. I find that the routine weekly sessions help me with a little bit of predictability, whereas working with some of my clients who transitioned into an intensive model helps them to get through their therapy goals faster, and then working in an intensive package kind of way helps me do deeper work, do more focused work in an adjunctive way. So I'm supporting someone's goals, right? They love their talk therapist, they want to continue working with their talk therapist, but they keep hearing they need to try brain spotting or EMDR or something like that. And so they come to me for 2 days, do that work, and then they go back to their talk therapist. So I do a mixture, but for you all, I want you to think about what is the setup that you want, because you might want a mixture, or you might want Maybe I mostly keep my weekly, my every other week sessions, but then once a month I do an intensive package. Or maybe I have one day of the week where I only do therapy intensives. So just think about what that would look like for you and then start planning for it. Like look a couple months in your calendar right now and start to make space for that, right? If I want to see people for 90-minute chunks, what are the 90-minute chunks I'm going to set aside? If I want to do a 4-hour session, what's a 4-hour block I'm going to set aside? Because if you don't, mark off space for this, then it's going to be really hard to be intentional about it and it's going to be hard to commit to it. And what I don't want you to do is feel like I can't make it work, and so you're not planning for it to work, because if you plan for it to work, you will make it work. There are so many clients looking for intensive therapy. I'm booked out for a couple months at this point because so many people want it. So something to think about. The second thing that I want you to consider is in these different ways of working, if you're working intensively, if you're doing intensive packages, what is your personal max for an intensive? And by that, I mean, sometimes I sit with clients for 4 hours straight with like bathroom stretch breaks in between, but sometimes it's been 4 hours straight and I can do that. That's not a problem for me. You may not have that same limit. You might say 90 minutes is more than enough. I need a break. I need to get up. I need to stretch. So think about what is that for you, because especially if you're going to develop any packages around that, that would be the thing that you want to write up, put on your website, and pitch to people. So is that we're doing 90-minute sessions once a week for a week, and that's your package? Or is that we're doing 8 hours of therapy where we're doing 4 hours and then we're taking a break and then we're doing 4 hours? So just think about what's your personal max, because it does not have to be what someone else's is. It is perfectly okay for it to be 90 minutes is still an intensive session. So if that's where you're at, then do that. So first, how do you want to incorporate it? Do you want a mix of weekly and intensives? Do you want to have both? You want to be setting aside time, doing all those things related to scheduling. Second, what's your max? Maximum 90 minutes, maximum 4 hours. I think I've seen people do 8 hours straight. I don't know how they see. That's not my personal max. So just be thinking about what everyone does. I don't know why sometimes when I do the thumbs up, Facebook just makes it look like I did a thumbs up, but that's fun. So the third thing to be considering is, are you going to offer these intensives online, in person, or a combination? So the things that you want to be thinking about there is, if you want to just do virtual therapy because that's already what you do for your routine sessions, intensives still work on a virtual setting. So I will do 3-hour sessions, 90-minute sessions. I've done one 4-hour session virtually. And again, that's fine. It can work. And things that you want to be thinking about are both, again, like your personal capacity in front of a computer, because sometimes that feels a little bit different than if you're in person, as well as the clients. Some people, if they're sitting on their bed, sitting on their floor, maybe aren't as in a comfortable position to be doing some more extended work. So that could be another thing where you say in your packages that you offer, it's a 3-hour max if we do teletherapy versus it'd be a 5-hour max if we do it in person, or again, whatever that looks like specifically for you. If you typically do online, but maybe you're thinking it'd be cool to do an intensive in person, then you have to start thinking about, well, what's rent space going to look like? Do you have access to somewhere where you can even just like sublease a space? I sublease a space for just a few days a month, so I pay much lower than if I were to rent a full office for a month that I'm not going to use. So that could be something that you do, is looking into subleasing just a couple days, and then those are the couple days where that's when you offer, like, the only time I can see you in person are these days, otherwise it's a virtual option. And then 2, part of why you're thinking about that is, do you want the fees, so the costs that you are charging for the intensive, do you want that to include the cost of the rent that you're paying? Because obviously you can do that, because people are Those who are really looking for in-person therapy, whether that's for weekly, whether that's for intensives, if it's that important to them, they will pay the difference in that. People have paid the difference for that. And even if it's like a weekend in person, some people are willing to pay a lot more for that because not a lot of therapists offer that. So, are you going to offer online, in person, or a combination? That's the next thing to be thinking about. And then when it comes to the logistics of things, so let's say you put it on your website, you advertise it as a service, and then people say, yes, sign me up for that. What do the next steps look like? So you want to be thinking about the specifics of with your intake paperwork. So what do you want to include in your policies around intensive therapy? So for example, my informed consent form for general therapy talks a little bit more about, on average, here's what people can expect in terms of how long they're spending in therapy. Here's what research says. Obviously, that depends on your previous experience with therapy, what you're coming in for support with, your commitment to therapy, stuff like that. Whereas my intensive informed consent form is different because people who are doing intensive therapy aren't necessarily signing up for, I want to do a 4-hour session every week. And because intensives do accelerate progress, because you're getting more time, you're opening up things in a more condensed period of time, it's more unpredictable, kind of what there's not a lot of, not that there's not a lot of research on therapy intensives, there are, but obviously the research is a little bit more limited because not a lot of people are working this way. Not a lot of people have been working this way for so long to do research on it. Not people who are working this way have paid to support and publish research around it. So limitations around that for sure. But again, for you, that just means being mindful of, so what are you writing in that informed consent form? I say something to the extent of, you are agreeing that the nature of our relationship is short term due to the intensive package. So I'm saying you have signed up for a 2-day intensive. You have signed up for like whatever that is. It's just making that explicit of, again, if you are doing the adjunctive therapy only, it's different if you're working with routine clients 90 minutes every week or something like that. But if you're only working with people in an adjunctive service, like spell that out. Because again, not that it's a problem to do it, but when people ask questions about liability and like whose client is it, if they have a weekly therapist and they see you for adjunctive therapy, if you've got an informed consent form that's saying, like, you agreed, you are doing this as adjunctive therapy, we are working together for this period of time, here's the intended outcomes and expectations and things like that, then at least from like that informed consent capacity, like you're covering your bases around, they know what they're signing up for when it comes to a time limited kind of therapy experience with you. So you want to have something about that. And then otherwise, when you're thinking about, well, what am I writing in the treatment plan? How am I documenting medical necessity in notes and things like that? Again, because each intensive session is going to be so different depending on what therapy approaches you use, depending on what the client is coming in for. Are they like, I have this one thing I want to get through, or here's this list of 5 things and we'll just kind of work with them as they come. Your treatment plan's probably going to evolve, and sometimes a lot more quickly, usually more quickly than, what am I trying to say? Than if you are seeing someone like weekly. Like, how often does it change when you're already doing it weekly? But especially in an intensive, things change. So at least again, in the treatment plan, I'm writing things like, again, the client has agreed and said they are coming in for this time-limited therapy. How we'll know treatment is finished is either after this 2-day period or when client feels stable enough to return to their primary talk therapist, something like that. So be thinking about how you want to document that in the treatment plan. And then with medical necessity, again, a lot of people are coming into therapy intensives because they have more intense symptoms that are harder to navigate and manage. That's why they see the benefit of the therapy intensive of let me just sit down for a few hours and go through this. So to be thinking about like due to their diagnosis, due to their complicated presentation, due to lack of support system, due to intensity and severity of symptoms and how they're interfering with daily functioning, like at the very least 90837 or extended intensive therapy, however you want to write that, is medically necessary to treat these concerns. So those are things you can write whether you're working with like insurance or not, just to like, show that you made your decisions for like clinical reasoning. So those are some things that are important to think about paperwork wise, as well as what are some assessments you may want to be using when it comes to typical assessments. I know some people send out like PHQ-9, GAD-7. Some people will do like ACEs or things like that. But is there any paperwork otherwise, any additional assessments that you think would be helpful for knowing what you need to prepare the client for when it comes to the intensive session? So that can be, some people like to assess for dissociation, or some people might assess a little bit more for trauma experiences outside of just like a ACEs questionnaire if you do like a PCL5 or something like that. So just think about like what you most want to and would feel comfortable knowing, having more assessment before that intensive. So you're thinking about all those things when it comes to paperwork, establishing your policies, laying out things clearly with informed consent. And then I kind of just started to touch on this a little bit too around when you think about, okay, not only what are you charging, but how are you charging for it? So there's a big split basically between, is this private pay, is this out of pocket, are we trying to work with insurance? So obviously if you are doing private pay out of pocket, we don't have to think about necessarily the coding for things or necessarily how you're billing, things like that. Out of pocket's more straightforward. That doesn't mean it can't work in an insurance-based model. There's just some things you have to think about. But either way, when you think about how you want to set your fees, the number one thing I tell people is please do not take your hourly rate and just double it for a 2-hour session or triple it for a 3-hour session, because all you are doing is working more and you are just working harder. You're not being smarter with your time, because again, like if you do a package model where, okay, I'm going to do a 4-hour intensive, so that's an additional 4 hours in my clinical caseload, all you're making is 4 more hours worth of money. Like you could have taken on 4 weekly clients if you wanted to, but most of you are not in that place. You're saying, I'm capped at my weekly sessions. I can't consistently add more. I could maybe once a month add 4 more hours. That seems fine. Okay, well then we have to not just like make it worth your time, but we do have to make it something where what we don't want is you showing up to these experiences or your weekly sessions burnt out or tired or overworked. And so if you are charging more of like a percentage on top of your hourly fee for these intensive sessions, then you get more out of it. And clients do not have a problem doing this. I know a lot of people say, how are people going to pay the higher fees? How do we make it work? There's ways you can make it work. People get smart with their resources, like their FSA card, their HSA card. I see a lot of therapists who use like care credit. That's something that it's literally a credit card for health purposes for what insurance does not cover. So there are a lot of ways that you can be creative with that. But my recommendation is if you are spending more than, and again, even like the 90 minutes, but especially 2 hours and above with a client, I want you to add 20% on top of your hourly rate. And that would mean if you have a 50-minute rate, calculate your hourly rate and then put 20% on top of that. And again, if you market it well, if you explain the benefit of this is actually going to help you do more work in less time, like, right, that's what you're telling clients, they're not going to have a problem for, well, why is it not just double what I'm paying now? They're going to say like, yeah, that makes sense, right? You're giving them a premium kind of VIP service. So 20%, again, even if you do like 10%, 15% above, it's small when you actually really consider it. That's what I do for if I'm working my typical Monday through Thursday hours, I'll do that. And then I do 50% outside of my normal hours. So those are things that you can think about when it comes to payment, how you want to make that work. I'm seeing I see like what's it called? An alert that I'm getting comments, but I'm not actually seeing comments show up in the chat box. Ah, there, now I do see it. I just had to click something. All right, thanks for coming while you could. So now that I see that other question from Maggie, let me answer that. Do I require my patients to intensives sessions? Ooh, yes, so good question. So I definitely do longer intake sessions with my clients who are doing intensives because there is more that I want to assess for. Because part of what I pitch the benefit as doing an intensive is this aspect of when we get to the intensive session, we're just diving right in. So when I want to and need to feel comfortable about that, it means I need to do more thorough assessment. So I have 90-minute intake appointments for my intensives, where again, I'm having them do a little bit more paperwork. I'm getting more background information with the paperwork I send them before the intake. And then in the intake, we're expanding on that a lot more. So definitely more information that I'm getting from them before the intake. Now, if I do have a client who I've been seeing weekly, then transition to more intensive services. Obviously, I've got some information from them, but if they are changing their routine from a 50-minute session to a 2-hour session, then I want to make sure I'm giving a little bit more informed consent around, well, here's what that's going to look like, here's what that might mean, here is how that's going to change your fee, stuff like that. So let me know if that answered your question, Maggie. Hopefully it does. And sorry that for some reason I couldn't see that beforehand. So with, again, out of pocket, again, charge more than your hourly rate, do some kind of percentage on top of that so that you are both being smarter with your time. You are feeling more, you're really getting paid more for like your value and your expertise as opposed to the time that you're in front of the client. So I want you to think about that too. That's part of what's in that higher rate. Now, if you are trying to make this work with insurance, again, like I said, it's not that you can't do it, it's just a little trickier. So one of the easier things that I've seen some people do is the 90-minute sessions. So that can either be in part built into the 90837. I know some people just do a higher fee for that and still will bill the 90837. So that just kind of depends on what is insurance going to cover the additional part that you bill. So some people work it out where they do have agreements with their clients of, I'm going to bill the maximum amount I can for the 90837, and then any additional will be due to you. I know that gets complicated with insurance plans and their rules around like balance billing and things like that, but people do make it work. Again, as long as you've got good forms to sign, usually it's totally above board. As well, again, this is not all insurance companies that do this, but some do. So if you are interested in doing this, call the contacts that you have for those insurance plans beforehand, but you can ask questions about, well, can I bill 2 units of 90837 or 90834, which would then give you the capacity to do 90 minutes and 2-hour sessions. So some insurance plans, it depends on who, it depends on what state, it depends on the sub plan, because we know there's like premium and basic and stuff like that. But some will allow for billing 2 units. So that would at least allow you to work in 90 to 2-hour minute increments without really any additional cost to the client. So make sure you're calling those insurance plan providers to see what that could be, as well as some people have had success just giving a call to an insurance plan and asking for almost like pre-authorization of that intensive work. So if you can talk with the people, explain the medical necessity, explain the time limited nature of it, some but not all will give that pre-authorization and say, yes, that's fine. Here's how you bill it in order for the client to minimize some of the expenses and for you to maximize your expenses. So those are all the things payment related to be thinking about. And then one of the last things to consider is really just what are your own clinical boundaries when it comes to who you would want to do an intensive with. So for example, are there specific diagnoses? Is there a specific level of complexity? Like I typically am working with PTSD, CPTSD. I see people who have some kind of spectrum in some dissociative disorders, but no one who's been aware of, who's come into me knowing that they've had like dissociative identity disorder or bipolar 2 or psychosis, schizophrenia. Like if it's not already something that I work with, I'm likely not working with it in an intensive capacity, because that's our own whole piece too around only practicing within your scope, within your expertise. So again, intensive therapy is really just doing more of what you already do, just in a condensed timeline, but also with more, like it's condensed timeline in the sense of like, here's 4 hours, but you're doing essentially what you would do in 4 weeks worth of weekly therapy. So you're doing all the same things, but yeah, just consider, are there boundaries that you have? Couples, for example, for those of you who are interested in doing couples intensives, I don't really work with people who are like on the brink of divorce, and that's why they're trying to sign up for an intensive, because number one, like I don't even see those people in a weekly capacity, but number two, that's where I talk with people around expectation management of, there are some therapists who specialize in working with people who are at this level of distress in their relationship. That's not really where my skill set is. My skill set is more around building up the emotional intimacy and increasing vulnerability. So the people who are coming with like, there's been recent infidelity and there's no trust in this relationship and we're trying to do an intensive to save it, those are people I'm usually not taking on. So again, there are people that you are normally going to accept and normally turn away. So that shouldn't have to change in an intensive, particularly because of the benefits of the intensive, of how you would write that on your website, of you can feel so much better within just a matter of days, and here's how it's more beneficial than weekly therapy. You are likely also going to get people who are calling you not in like super high crisis, but who will say like, I am in a crisis. And that is up to your clinical judgment around, okay, well, what exactly is the crisis? Like, what does that mean? Because intensive therapy is not intensive outpatient programs. So that's for you to, again, do some of that assessment on like a consultation call. That's for you to be thinking about, again, if I don't typically work with a client like this, would I want to work with them in this intensive way? So those are things all to be considering around how you want to incorporate it into your practice, what you do in your paperwork, how you set up the fees, and what you think about for kind of screening people in and out. And quite honestly, as I'm talking about your clinical boundaries, it's not that there's a particular diagnosis, population, presentation that's a bad fit for intensive therapy. It's more a matter of like, again, your comfort level, your skill, your expertise, and things you want to be working with. Because everything is about expectation management. Because yes, an intensive therapy experience will accelerate someone's process. But how long have you been with a client where across a year of weekly sessions, and it's like, oh, wow, it took this long to get a year of this done, but they're grateful it's been done. So it's not about, 4 hours is going to change everything. It's just, we're just accelerating it, right? We're doing a month's worth of therapy in half of a day. So you're not promising a cure-all, but this is just about, you can do really good work. Here's the time that we have to do it, but also here's managing those expectations around. It's not necessarily going to fix everything, but it likely will make you feel better because we're doing a lot in a little bit of time. So those are things to consider. Next things to think about doing are adding these as services to your website, to your therapy directories if you're more active on that. Bye, Cherie. And then starting to ask any current clients if they are interested, because more people are than you would think. Because a lot of people don't even know that it's an option that exists in therapy. They're used to hour-long sessions. So those are things just to be thinking about is, can I ask my current clients, would you be willing to try this? Would you be interested in trying this? And then just start marketing the new ones. And again, marketing can just be putting them as a service on your website. That is quite honestly the only way I market that service on my website. I don't network and tell people about them. I've done maybe like 2 posts on Instagram about them, but no one's called me saying, I saw that post on Instagram and I'm following up on it. So really just as long as it's on your website and your website can be found and you're talking about them in a really, really good way, people are going to be interested, they're going to call you, and they're going to be at the consultation call ready to go to sign up. So that is all that I have. So things to consider and then things to do. Again, if you have any questions, if you are here live, feel free to put anything in the chat and I will answer that before I sign off. And if you are catching the replay, feel free to, again, put comments in there. Feel free to message me directly with any questions you have. But otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you all around. I hope you have a good rest of your day and good rest of your week. Happy Halloween weekend if you are watching any good movies, eating any good candy, going trick-or-treating, whatever you might be doing. But thank you all for coming, those of you who are able to make it. I'll see you next time. Bye.